This is Occupy Maine TV on Portland's community television network.
The state constitution also provides many protections that the federal constitution doesn't, that we believe, if construed literally by the court, could allow for a different outcome favorable to Occupy Maine with regard to their constitutional right to maintain a continued presence.
They are going to not have the services that enable them to stay independent in their communities and to be part of the fabric of our beautiful Maine life. People who are scared, who don't know where to go, who will have nowhere to turn if these cuts go through.
I am Brian Leonard.
I'm Bob Klotz.
And I am Regis Tremblay. And we'll have these stories and more on today's Occupy Maine TV show. Occupy Maine TV is a creative new way to communicate and clarify the mission, goals, and objectives of the Occupy protest movement that is sweeping across the country and the globe, from Egypt to Russia, the Middle East, Europe, and across the United States. People are protesting against immoral forms of government, selfish and corrupt corporate practices, and the trashing of national and international economies by banks and financial institutions. The anger that spawned this movement is not going to go away because no one will argue about the assault on the middle class and the poor who have lost their pensions, their health care, their homes, and their jobs. On top of that, the middle class have had to bail out the banks who are too big to fail, while the largest corporations and wealthiest among us have either paid no taxes or not their fair share. So, what are the four major demands of the Occupy movement? Number one, we demand that we take away the unrestricted power of Wall Street and the banks that let them gamble with our money and make obscene and immoral profits while the 99% of us got sold out. Brian and Bob, that's what everybody's talking about. Banks got bailed out, we got sold out. Your thoughts?
Oh, wow. Yeah, the corporate influence over our democracy, well, it takes out our democracy. The fact that they can now put as much money as they want to in any election, any candidate, or any issue, these corporations have effectively taken the vote out of our hands as citizens.
And Bob, what were your thoughts on the bailout for Wall Street? And they got away with murder.
They did.
They gave themselves enormous benefits and left the rest of us out to dry. We paid for it.
And I mean, as you said, corrupt and immoral, but also strong evidence of it being illegal. To this day, there appears to be no significant criminal charges put out against these people, which is clearly, if it were a different level of crime or a different level of the population, there would have been action taken.
It's amazing that nothing has happened to get that money back. If we could just get the money back, some people might be satisfied, much less bring criminal accusations
Correct.
against them and drag them into court.
Yes.
You know, this is one of the things that has really upset a lot of people. And I don't know about you, but I kind of feel powerless. What can I do when my elected representatives in Congress gave them the money, took it out of our pockets to give it to them to pay for them, and are doing nothing to get it back? I find that it's really unbelievable. Well, the second demand of the Occupy movement is to end the two wars of aggression, which were unfunded, and bring the troops home. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq have already cost the American people $3.7 trillion. And when treatment for injured vets are figured into that number will be more than $6 trillion. You know, we got taken into Iraq on a lie, and we got taken into Afghanistan with no way to pay for it. What's that done to our economy?
To our economy, I mean, well, first of all, to pay for that war, well, we didn't pay for the war. First, we didn't pay for the war. Second, we gave Halliburton a no-bid contract that we as taxpayers are paying for.
Bob, hasn't that added tremendously to the deficit that everybody's so concerned about and that Congress couldn't solve?
Enormously and apparently denied. I mean, the issue for me is the lack of credibility from the beginning of so many aspects of this, but in terms of the war in particular, right from the beginning, as you said, a lie, and continues to be denied as a factor in this issue. And you get all these sound bites about everything but this tremendous travesty that's had enormous impact.
You know, and we've lost thousands of our own soldiers, over 4,000. I don't know how many wounded American soldiers, but nobody talks about over 100,000 Iraqis killed, and maybe another 100,000 homeless. It's incredible the cost of this war, not just the United States, but NATO and the Iraqi people. I think it was criminal and it was immoral. And again, who's going to be brought to justice for this?
Right.
I think, you know, when you talk about the demands of the Occupy movement, you know, we talk about the deficit and we talk about how did we get there. Well, these two wars have added tremendously to that. And Brian, who's going to pay for that?
Who's going to pay for that? Our children are going to pay for that after we begin to. There's no telling the amount of time that this will. I don't know if we'll ever recover from this completely. We won't without raising some sort of taxes, especially on the higher end.
Well, isn't this amazing? You and I were talking earlier that these two wars were probably the first that this country's ever been engaged in that we didn't raise taxes somewhat to pay for it.
That's right.
And you reminded me of the first President Bush.
Right.
When he said, "Read my lips."
Read my lips, no new taxes. That's right.
And then you went to Gulf War, and
Right.
what did he have to do?
He had to raise
taxes to pay for it.
On the higher
and
end.
nobody wants to talk about raising taxes.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. How will we? How will we pay for it? And they're trying to lump it onto the backs of the middle class.
And there's another major grievance, isn't it? The 91%, we're going to pay for it, and then the poor, who are voiceless and powerless, how are they going to pay for it, Bob?
Well, and I wanted to emphasize, to reinforce what you're saying, we are and they are paying for it now. It's not something certainly there's that effort to push it down the road, but it's already impacting on us. And whether it's the two sides of the mouth support the troop issue, where you have these people coming back injured and having services denied, and the story rewritten basically after the fact from their trauma and so forth, and there's lots of detail about that, or the reactivity that we're dealing with on the state level, on the national level, that again continues to deny that this even has an impact.
So the reactivity, are you talking about, for example, there isn't enough money to take care of the homeless?
Exactly, yes, all of that.
Healthcare?
All of that.
Rebuild the infrastructure?
We haven't talked about the support of the veterans as they come back and the cost that will be. I mean, in every aspect, mental health and physical.
So you were right. We're paying for it right now through a loss of services that is going to further cripple, I think, the economy and cripple our ability to be a civilized and first world country. It's really sad. The third demand, we need to take away the right of corporations and the wealthy to make political contributions. We've got to take all of the money out of elections. We started talking about this a little bit in the first demand, but this is something really specific. People say, what do you want? I don't get what it is you're complaining about. Bob, what would taking the money out of elections do to the entire congressional, government, and financial and corporate structure that's in place now?
Well, the hope would be that it would make it more honest, more transparent. Currently there are so many layers of mystery as to what's going on, beyond the absurdity that these corporations are given personhood. And so the hope would be that it would make it more transparent, and people would start to see the direct impact of their choices and their ability to make change.
Brian?
Yeah.
Money in elections.
Money in elections. Wow. You cannot say enough. Everything starts with the money being in there. like we said about like Halliburton puts on a war, no big contract. We paid this corporation to put on a war rather than take care of it ourselves. The influence that corporations already had before the war was extreme. Now that they've taken all stops out with this Supreme Court decision.
Unlimited amount of money
Unlimited
can be
amount of
contributed to candidates, yeah. What does that do, though, to a candidate who's getting several $1 million from a large corporation? What are they bound to do? What are they beholding to?
Right. Oh, man. Yeah, they're definitely going to listen. If they want to be reelected, if they want to have the reelection campaign funds that they apparently need to compete with the next, corporate-sponsored person, then they will definitely listen so that they can get that money on the comeback.
Bob, isn't that part of the democracy and the new demand for democracy and direct democracy that we people, we want to take our government back because it doesn't belong to us.
Right.
It belongs to
These corporations.
Yeah, the follow the money phrase, is the simplest and most obvious way this stuff works at this point. And that we won't deny that money is an important variable, but it's one of the variables. In the current system, it seems to be, if not the primary, the only. And part of the Occupy movement, again, fundamentally, is to empower people beyond just money to take their government back, rather than corporations essentially being the government.
Brian, tell me a little bit about, the Occupy movement and this direct democracy, and down here at Lincoln Park, for example, they're forming a new community. Tell me what it's based on, and tell me how they govern themselves, because it isn't just a bunch of people down there squatting. Right. They're forming a new kind of community. What has that been like?
Well, what has it been like? Well, it's been, first of all, it has given me so much a feeling, such a feeling of empowerment. It has brought me out of my shell, gotten me to communicate with people I'd never would have known in my life. This direct democracy, rather than what we have as this representative democracy in America, this direct democracy gives me a voice, gives each person a voice, and certainly just that a feeling of empowerment, a feeling of my voice is being heard.
My voice is being heard. So is there any one person down there that said, okay, time's up, this is what we're going to do?
No. In fact, it would make it easier if we did.
And it'd be a lot faster, right?
Oh, absolutely. Right.
So tell me about some of the dynamics when you're in a group assembly, and one person could bring the whole thing to a stop until we come to what? A consensus?
Consensus, yeah. Well, yeah, not everything needs to go through consensus, but many of our major decisions we like to go have a group consensus. If one person is trying to overshadow, actually, they might not be trying to, they might inadvertently try to overshadow or overpower, maybe because of their passion on a subject is so heavy. But no matter, it always ends up in being a group decision. That's a wonderful feeling to have.
The hardest thing to learn probably for a lot of people is to listen, to really listen with your ears and your mind and your heart to what another person is saying.
And not speak out and interrupt them. Right?
That's right.
Like I just did.
No, but that's right.
Right.
And it is so different than the way corporations run, the way our towns run, the way our state runs, and the way federal government runs. It's just totally different.
Right.
And this new direct democracy, isn't it really a bottoms-up approach?
Absolutely. In fact, there is no bottom. That's the thing. There's no top and there's no bottom. This is completely horizontal.
We have to change the way we think of the whole thing.
Right, exactly.
And it does demand a lot of people. I mean, oftentimes we're used to being more passive and letting our representatives represent us, and You know, maybe we write a letter of complaint if it isn't quite the way.
Right.
But, you know, it can be pretty challenging in the current environment to feel like you have a voice. And my experience with the Occupy movement to date is you have that opportunity, but you still have to kind of challenge yourself and find those opportunities.
Yeah, I found it very interesting. I mean, you've been down there constantly. We've heard some of the folks who have never experienced this before in their lives. You were touching on that. Nobody's ever listened to them before. They maybe never even had the opportunity to speak.
Right.
And what is that? What have you seen that do for people?
Well, right. You see that sense of hope light up. You know, you see them come in from literally their world which is of despair, and when they see that they have a voice in this new community, you can see their eyes and even their shoulders lift up. You know.
And
throughout the process.
They don't hesitate to jump in and help out with whatever it needs to be done.
In most
now we're
cases,
talking about
right.
the homeless.
Yeah.
But this is not just about the homeless people feeling this.
Right.
I mean, I've seen people out, and we've got interviews of people on the streets who have come from Freeport,
Right.
Yarmouth, Cape Elizabeth,
Right.
South Portland, people of the middle class and people of means, maybe some of the wealthiest.
Right.
And they too have felt left out of the conversation until now, when they feel, I can come down there with a sign,
Right.
you know, I can wave to people as they go by in their cars, and I might even leave a little donation of maybe money or clothes, some propane to run the illegal heaters.
Right.
But it is, isn't it, giving people an opportunity to connect in ways that, you know what, the mainline media and press don't show.
And I'd like to say that before this, I was solely writing to my representatives just to get, form letters back in the email. Before Occupy Maine, I was not an activist. I was just, upset with the way things were working, and I felt like I could do little more other than write my representative and yell at the television screen. With zero power, because I would just get the a form letter from someone that worked under them, probably at their office. So this has been for everyone involved, no matter if you are if you are homeless or if you are in the higher end of the 99%. This is where we can come in and participate equally.
Yeah, what's interesting, Bob, across the globe, people are coming out of their homes in the thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions when you look at it globally, who are coming into the streets and not organized, just it's sort of spontaneous protest against the evil, the injustice, and this terrible distribution of wealth that doesn't include the majority of people in the world. What do you think about the protests? Bob, do you think they're getting attention, or is the media just pretty much done with them now?
Well, I think they have gotten attention. Unfortunately, again, the media mainstream tends to marginalize and demonize and keep people in pretty tight margins of black and white simplistic thinking. And for me, the excitement, what worked for me, what got me involved with the Zuccotti Park event, just said to me, this is not okay. I mean, this could be me. This could be people coming in and taking my personal items and moving me out of my space. And that got me down to Monument Square. I was reminded that it wasn't a protest, it was an occupation, and wasn't quite sure what to do with that, but I see that it's actually both. And I just want to reinforce some of what Brian was saying, that people have the ability to contribute in so many ways, in their own personal way, with their own particular passions. And I've been excited to see the different, the scope of people who are out there, the different experiences. And I actually know a number of people from different environments where, frankly, they're less empowered. And I've seen them empowered. I was excited to see a number of those individuals speak at the city council meeting. very articulately, very passionately, very excitedly. And having seen them in an environment where they weren't able to do that, you know, it was nice to see them really alive and having a purpose.
And what was really interesting was the stark contrast between those 40 or 50 people of all ages, all colors,
Right.
speaking passionately about their rights, their constitutional rights, the First Amendment, about the evils of society, the evils that even the city of Portland has been perpetuating.
Right.
And then the council going, no, 8-1,
Right.
we're not going to deal with this, when they could have erred on the side of the Constitution
Right.
and done a really noble thing to allow this to happen. This is what I find very interesting as well. If you listen to the comments of the councilors, they were concerned about the eyesore. Oh yeah, there's health, dangers to health, human safety, food. No one's been poisoned. There hasn't been a fire. And what violence there's been has been really from some troublemakers that are really not part of the movement. And they've moved on, they've gone. Bob, isn't the whole point of occupation and protest to make people uncomfortable?
Right, exactly. Right. And as I've said, nature is messy. I mean, if you really look at nature, it's you know, things aren't nice and orderly. And you know, so it's an organic process. There's going to be messy parts of it, but there's also in that nature beautiful things. And to me, even I know for me personally that it was a bit of a hit for me after all that wonderful sharing that people had. Even though we might have anticipated it, for the council to vote the way they did, sort of knocked the feet out from under me a bit. But it's still, kind of to go back to your question, are the protests working? That's almost proof that it is, because they sort of behaved as predicted, which then gives us an opportunity to say, there they are again. And
it is working, because every time a city shuts it down, every time the police come out in riot gear, it gets somebody else's attention.
Right.
And I don't think a whole lot of people are cheering.
Right.
I think there's a whole lot of people that are disgusted by seeing the same brutality inflicted upon Americans that we see inflicted upon Egyptians, Libyans, Syrians, Yemenis, wherever they're from. We're protesting this. President Obama and Hillary Clinton are chastising the rest of the world for doing this. And we just watch the evening news, and there it is happening to a young kid at UC Berkeley
Davis,
or
UC
Davis.
Yeah.
This is not supposed to happen here.
And before we move from this, I want to point out that the City Council, although we can always deal with any health issues or safety issues, they're not going to. Their argument is that they won't let us stay after the park curfew, which is 10 p.m. They said right at City Hall that no matter what, you can't get past this ordinance of staying past 10 p.m., which we all know they bend on all rules of ordinance.
And we'll have a little bit later in the show.
We'll talk about that.
The Occupy attorney, pro bono, John Branson, is going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's lots more room for more conversation in the future on future shows. But the fourth demand, the fourth grievance that people in this country are outraged by is we've got to change the unfair taxation structure which permits corporations like General Electric to pay no taxes and the wealthiest Americans to pay far less than the rest of us. We've got to end the Bush tax cuts now. Amazing. Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest people in the world, goes before Congress and says, tax us, tax me, because I can afford it.
He brought a group of billionaires with them too.
There's been several, Brian, haven't they?
Yeah,
and they've gone in. What have they asked Congress to do?
They say that to bring the taxes back to a standard that will help our country, their country, the country that they made their money from. You know, it wasn't without the freedoms of this country that they were able to get loans from banks to monopolize some more. They have had every break, whereas the middle class can't even get a loan for a house.
Yeah.
Not even with decent credit. So.
Bob, your thoughts on this tax structure in the United States?
It's obscene and absurd and oddly comical, again, that anybody would really support it. I mean, there's obviously a lot of press out there about Grover Norquist and this pledge that he's had conservatives sign that they would have no new taxes. Again, to have something so fundamentally drive this country into the ground is just amazing to me, that someone could be tied to that out of fear, again, out of some soundbite. It's just really insanity.
You know what I don't get? A lot of, I think, middle-class people that have opposed what they perceive the Occupy movement to be are suffering like everybody else because of this unfair structure. And by the way, that's part of the hope of this show, is to be able to educate and inform the wider population here, not only in the state of Maine, but wherever this show will be seen, about the injustices that are being inflicted on all of us. And that we've got to, Brian, as you keep saying, get out of our houses, get off our couches, and
participate. And you know, the one thing that bothers me the most is the aim of the media and the effective aim of the mainstream media to make this about like derelicts and protesters, and these are people that are patriotic, extremely patriotic. We love our country. It's not about not liking our country, it's about loving our country. So
I have a conservative friend who I meet with regularly, and he's dismissed this whole thing because it was started by anarchists. And that, and that's a soundbite you hear if you can listen
or
to.
socialists.
It's some dismissive thing. And as you say, ultimately, it's incredibly patriotic.
Absolutely.
And I think, and I hope that as we see the movement and the demonstrations grow, and it is growing by leaps and bounds every day. In recent press, the last couple of days, they're starting to now report on how enormous waves of people are descending upon Washington. They're not leaving Wall Street. That's going to continue to draw in people from all over the country and maybe the world, but now they've realized the other seat of power and corruption is Washington. And this reminds me of the 60s and the 70s during the civil rights movement and marches and the anti-Vietnam War. Where did they descend upon? Washington. Well, this has been a fascinating discussion. We will continue show after show talking about these issues and bringing in special guests who will share with us their perspective.
Hi, my name is Melanie Collins. I'm an employer in Falmouth, Maine. I have my own business for the last 12 years, taking care of infants and small children in my home. I'm a registered nurse, and I am here at Occupy Maine, Occupy Portland, because I believe that the 99% of Americans need a better deal.
My guest today in studio is John Branson, a local attorney who is representing the Occupy movement here in Maine. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit more about this community that they were forming, because if you look at some of the public reaction, they call them vagrants, bums, lazy, go out and get a job, they don't take showers, they smell, and they're accused of all kinds of other things, from drunkenness to using drugs. Is that the kind of community that they were forming? I mean, the public seems to think that's what's going on.
We've been accused of including in our movement what people like to call the riffraff, the rabble, the bums. We proudly call those people part of our movement, and we believe in many ways those individuals are the heart and soul of the movement, because they've been most severely affected by the state of things in the world. Yes, there were some who came who might fit that description, who had nothing to do with the movement, didn't want to participate in the General Assembly or life around the camp. They were just looking for a place to pitch a tent, and they took advantage of an opportunity. And there were a number of incidents involving drunken disorderly conduct. This began sort of in early to mid-November, after the numbers had really begun to increase in terms of the number of occupants in Lincoln Park and the number of tents. But there are many people homeless with no other place to go, people whom society calls vagrants or bums, that we proudly call occupiers, who are donating their time, effort, sweat, ideas to this movement. They have commented more than once that this is the one place where there's no formal distinction between being homeless and not being homeless. They are treated like human beings, and they have every right to participate in our direct democracy as well as in the goings-on at the community encampment.
Would you say then that for some of these people who are homeless, and they're people that were without voice in our society, in our democracy, that maybe for the first time in their lives they were given a sense of belonging and purpose and respect and dignity? Is some of that happening?
Well, they've said that, and I've heard more than one say that. And I mean, this is the group of people that society prefers to ignore and disregard and try to keep out of public sight. I mean, a lot of the various city ordinances, including this loitering ordinance, is about trying to either lock the homeless up or move them around, keep them moving so they can't settle anywhere, make sure that they are not a visible part of the Portland landscape. This is the wealthiest city in the state by far. It's embarrassing that people sleep on the streets, go hungry at night, and I mean, Occupy's biggest crime is to shine a very bright spotlight on some of the most shameful conditions facing the most vulnerable people in our own community here. And in fact, some are calling these the other 1%. So you've got the 1% at the top that owns 42% of the private wealth in the country and controls Congress and state legislatures and economic and social policy. And then you got the 1% at the very bottom. Probably a larger figure than that. I don't know the homeless population, but the very vulnerable, the people with nothing. We often forget those people. One thing Occupy is bringing back into the spotlight, I think, is attention on the plight of the poor and homeless. Because what you've heard in the mainstream discourse over the last 2 years is the assault on the American middle class, which no one denies. I mean, this is the big change, that since the dawn of the Clinton era, both major political parties have been sticking it to the middle class, have been favoring policies that support the very, very rich and shipping all the jobs overseas, deregulating the financial industry in a way that plundered the economy and further assault on the middle class and pension funds. And yet you've got little talk about, well, what's happening to the very poor and the homeless? They've been sort of absent from the public discourse. President Obama's State of the Union address was, I think, the first State of the Union address not to mention the word poverty or poor. The last president that had a formal program to address the plight of poor people was Bill Clinton, which was to abolish FDR's AFDC program. Before that, it was Richard Nixon who had a poverty program. So these people have been pushed off the radar screen entirely. Occupy is saying, you know, it's not just the middle class that's been under assault. Look at these people. Right. And they've been getting it for years. I mean, since the dawn of probably the Reagan era and before.
So let's fast forward a bit, or continue the progression to the city council meeting last week. And you were the first to present the case. You presented the case for Occupy. Two things. One, they voted 8-1 to not allow them to camp, but they seemed to express the belief that they were sympathetic to the movement and its causes. You had a very powerful and compelling testimony that concluded by arguing what to the city council? Well, we weren't allowed to speak after hearing the comments of the councilors. I think that was unfortunate because prior, when we gave our presentation, it was still having not yet received any formal feedback from members of the council.
other than the 3 Public Safety Committee members. So 3 of the 9 we had feedback
Yeah.
from. So we did the best we could to address the concerns we thought they had, and then of course once we started to hear what the concerns were, we didn't have a chance to respond. They then voted, and that was the end of the evening. They acknowledged the problems that exist, but I heard no formal endorsement of what Occupy has done to raise these issues and bring them back into the public consciousness. Citizens who are sleeping out in the cold to breathe life into the Constitution and what it means to be an American truly, to be patriotic, to believe that the Constitution means something and the country is worth saving. You know, I heard very little of that. I heard a lot about the fact that the group is not compliant with the city code, including the anti-loitering statute, and there's nothing that can be done to cure this petition to put them in compliance with the city code. The majority voice was, if it's not strictly in compliance with the city code, then we're not going to allow this to continue unless a court tells us that we have to. So they're basically saying, we're not going to do a single thing more than we have to do. And so we're going to stick to the letter of the city code. You can't be there past 10 p.m. End of story. There is no continuous assembly that you can maintain in Lincoln Park. That's it. They weren't willing to consider a single variance, including this 10 p.m. Anti-loitering clause. So I think what the group was upset by is we know for a fact that when commercial interests come before the council or before the zoning board or the planning board, the city regularly grants variances and waivers, changes its zoning code to accommodate powerful commercial interests that want to undertake development projects in the city or undertake a promotion, like constructing a ski slope in Monument Square for skiers and snowboarders. You don't think they had to bend some provisions of the city code to turn that into a ski park? Of course they did. But you got 2 powerful players, the owners of Sugarloaf and Sunday River. They've done it 3 years in a row. They're probably going to do it again this winter. And you know, this is what has happened to our public spaces. People forget that even good liberal politicians in Portland forget these places are primarily for citizens to gather for non-commercial purposes, not commercial purposes.
So your argument, though, as I understood it, was a First Amendment argument. Wasn't that correct?
Well,
and does the First Amendment trump local ordinances? Is that the argument going forward?
Well, it's not just the First Amendment, because the Maine Constitution is also fully applicable here. The Maine Constitution, Article 1 is the Declaration of Rights. There are 3 sections of the Declaration of Rights, four sections actually, that apply to what is going on here. There's the Section 1 of the Declaration of Rights provides, among other things, that people are free to enjoy and defend their liberty. All of the liberties granted them under the Constitution, for example. Section 2 allows them to alter, reform, or entirely replace their government when their safety and happiness require it. Section 15 allows them to assemble in public spaces, to consult and confer upon the common good. And there's nothing in any of those provisions that said, oh, by the way, they have to go home at 10 o'clock at night and they can't continue to assemble on a round-the-clock basis. And so what has arisen in the common law interpreting the Constitution is this time, place, and manner jurisprudence. What limitations can the state impose upon speech and assembly rights, which exist both under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution and under Article 1 of the Maine Constitution?
How hopeful are you that there'll be a conclusion that is successful in terms of being allowed to continue a presence there?
I think the best argument one can make is that to enforce like an ordinance, an anti-loitering ordinance that says you've got to be out of the park by 10, automatically says that this form of protest is not allowed. This form of protest that has captured the imagination of the world, captured the attention and imagination of the United States media and certain government officials. I mean, Occupy Maine has overcome the power of the 24-hour news cycle. When a protest march gets covered and then it's forgotten, and there's never any follow-up. If it gets covered at all, by the way.
Right.
A lot of these protest marches, 100,000 people, the mainstream press will, not even cover it. So here is a form of demonstration that has captured the public's attention in a way that serves the very interests of this group, to capture the attention of their government officials, to demand that they redress grievances. And if the courts interpret the Constitution in a way that forbids this type of protest, well, that to me is unconstitutional. Many of the cities, by the way, are allowing these occupations to continue. They're not forcing a constitutional showdown. They're interpreting the Constitution. They're erring on the side of respecting constitutional rights rather than abridging them.
Right, right.
They have every right to do that.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that the Constitution is a floor, not a ceiling. In other words, even if the city was sure that they were not constitutionally required to accommodate this kind of protest, if they felt it was good for the city, like when they gave Pierce Atwood a $2.8 million tax break to move its offices to the waterfront because they felt that was good for the city, they could conclude the same thing about what's
Sure.
going on,
Sure.
breathing life into the Constitution like these brave citizens are doing in Lincoln Park, and
Wouldn't-
say, we're going to let it stay on that basis.
Wouldn't it be great if the city of Portland and the state of Maine took that position? It'd be historic.
Well, the city manager basically did take that position. The sad fact is, it wasn't until the elected officials of the city of Portland got a hold of this issue that they said, enough is enough. And that's a quote from one of them.
Yeah.
We got to shut this down. And that's the opposite in the rest of the country. You've got mayors and executives that want to shut this down, and then you've got sympathetic city councils and city council members trying to say, this is amazing what's going on. These people are breathing life into their democracy. In Portland, it's the opposite. The elected officials are the most hostile, with a couple notable exceptions.
Well, John, I want to thank you very much for affording us this time. We'll have you back to keep us up to date and appraised of the progression of events and whatever is happening. But thank you very, very much for giving us this time.
Thank you, Regent. Hi, John Branson, legal counsel for Occupy Maine. It's with great pleasure, although some dismay, that I announce Occupy Maine's filing of a lawsuit to protect and defend the rights enshrined in both the federal and state constitutions, protecting their right to expression, assembly, petitioning activity, coming together to consult upon the common good, to debate and discuss the seminal issues of our time, the grave social, political, and economic injustices that cause people to sleep in public parks throughout the country in a time when the 1% are raking in record profits. So what these brave folks are doing during the coldest months of the year is seeking to remain and continue to draw the public's attention to issues that are important to the very survival of our democracy and our way of life. And so it wasn't our intention to have to file a lawsuit. There were many ways that the filing of a lawsuit could have been avoided. One would have been for the city to respect the constitutional rights of these protesters and to see that this is not a blight on the landscape, but a beacon of hope in a very dire and dark time. So we have today commenced a suit against the city of Portland on behalf of Occupy Maine and 4 individual members of Occupy Maine, seeking principally declaratory and injunctive relief based on past pending and threatened violations of their rights under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, and Article 1, Sections 2, 4, and 15 of the Maine Constitution. We have filed in Maine Superior Court for Cumberland County, which, pursuant to the Supremacy Clause, has not only the power but the obligation to enforce the rights under the federal Constitution, but there are additional rights, not only commensurate with, but above and beyond those set forth in the federal Constitution, that exist under Maine's Declaration of Rights, that Occupy Maine and the individual plaintiffs have relied upon in defending their right to continue to peaceably assemble, demonstrate, and petition the government for redress of grievances. The principal reason cited by the majority of council members in rejecting this group's petition is that it did not comply with the anti-loitering provision in the Code of Ordinances, which says you can't be in Lincoln Park between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6:30 a.m. Of course, that was an ordinance designed to prevent loitering. There is no exception in that ordinance for planned or spontaneous political demonstrations or other activity protected by the Maine and federal constitutions. What's unique about Occupy, by its very name, you see, it is a unique form of demonstration that depends upon the ability to maintain a sustained assembly for the purpose of achieving the sustained attention of the media, government officials, and the public at large. Because absent that sustained attention, Occupy Maine and its members believe that they will not be able to begin the process of recreating our democracy, reclaiming our public spaces and institutions, and tackling some of the injustices that they have fought so long and hard to resolve. All power is inherent in the people. All free governments are founded in their authority and instituted for their benefit. They have therefore an this is the people we're talking about, not the corporations. They have therefore an unalienable and indefeasible right to institute government, which is what they've done here in Lincoln Park, and to alter, reform, or totally change the same when their safety and happiness require it. There's no language like that in the federal Constitution. The additional language is in Section 15 as well, the Assembly and Petitioning Clause, which allows people to come together to confer upon the common good, to consult and confer upon the common good. Language that the framers of the U.S. Constitution bandied about when they were drafting the Bill of Rights. It didn't end up getting included in the federal Bill of Rights, but when Maine became a state in 1820 and the Constitution was ratified that March, we had in Maine enshrined in the Petitioning and Assembly Clause the inherent right to come together, to gather together, to consult and confer upon the common good. If you don't have the ability to maintain a sustained presence and community, as they are doing here in Lincoln Park, I do not think that right means anything. If you have to clear out at 10 o'clock every night, you can't have the kind of conversation that's going on in Lincoln Park, which is one of the most amazing conversations I've ever been part of. I'm proud to represent these guys and gals.
Have you had the coverage?
We hope the coverage is as much about the issues that the group is focused on as about the litigation, and the two are very much intertwined, so I think that's going to be unavoidable.
My name is Donna Little. I'm from Falmouth. I'm here as a protester, as an organizer, as I have been for about 10 years, since being a reader and keeping current, and knowing how we are being taken advantage of because some of us have less money and political power than those people we have elected to speak for us.
We're back. I'm here with Bob Klotz. Bob is a physician assistant. Welcome, Bob. We were talking earlier with Regis. I want to talk to you about healthcare because you're a PA. What is the relationship with healthcare and the Occupy movement, And what is the relationship to healthcare in Maine in itself?
Well, a very strong relationship. I mean, so often with the Occupy movement initially tied strongly to Wall Street, the other aspects of it aren't fully considered. And again, oftentimes critics of the Occupy movement sort of dismiss these other considerations because it's too confusing or what's their message or whatever. But for me, healthcare is an area that really looks at all the same issues. We're living in a country that has basically a medical industrial complex. We've heard a lot about the military industrial complex. But the medical system in this country is enormously expensive, enormously complicated, driven by corporate interests in just so many different ways. And how that trickles down from a national level to a state level to the individual level, it's just part of our lives.
Right. You know, every time I'm talking with someone that's in the healthcare field, I always have to ask them if they would have preferred to see national healthcare or single-payer healthcare. So I have to ask you now, what is your...
Well, for me, it's about, my biggest desire is to be able to have an effective conversation about that kind of stuff. And for me, the political process really didn't allow for that. Again, as is so often the case, it's either or. It's, you know, for me, healthcare, healing is a spectrum of opportunities. And and something that is a very narrow spectrum for most people in this country, particularly the 99%. They have very limited access, they have very limited care available, and so though it was nice to see some conversation about it, it became this all or nothing thing, and is what we have now is very imperfect, and obviously there's efforts to dismantle that effort today.
Right. If you saw what was going on in Augusta just this couple weeks ago, I believe it'll be now by the time the show comes up.
Yeah.
But you know, trying to cut Governor LePage wants to cut $65,000 from Maine Care. What do you see if he succeeds in that? What do you see happening? The people that really need these services, are they going to show up at ERs? Are they going to, you know, what will happen in this situation?
People will suffer, and they're already suffering tremendously. I mean, every day that I go into work, I'm challenged with just the numerous forces of time and money and who deserves what, which is absurd that in the healthcare business I have to be thinking about who deserves. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just really insane again. Right. So I think we're already struggling enormously to get people services, to have them have access, to get to people, to get them to us, and this is going to put enormous restrictions. And for me, it's just the shell game that we've seen so many times, the moving the costs, pushing it down the road, you know, lip service to talking about prevention, but just cutting that very critical part. So that people will be ending up in emergency rooms more, enormously expensive compared to prevention. People won't be getting services. People will be getting sicker. The costs are just going to inflate.
Yeah, that's right. So what do you think people can do themselves to help the situation in Maine? What can the person at home do?
Well, in my work with people, my goal is to really empower them as much as possible. Again, as with many aspects of our culture, there can tend to be a passivity that we're almost trained to. You know, I've been in medicine now for 35 years in different forms, and I learned early in my career that this model of people coming to me and I cure them or give them something is extremely flawed. And so it takes a lot of education, including for the patient, to realize that they have the ultimate power in their healing. Right. And so I try to engage with them as a partner, to support, really mostly as an educator. That's what I, very early in my career, started moving towards, was being more of an educator, to help people realize that they have the ability to heal. But they need to be educated in the fundamentals, and so that's one answer is continuing that, and that's a key part of prevention.
Right. And now, with that, how can they help in a political way? How in a social political way?
Well, I think I'll answer your question by just taking a step back and,
Okay.
and saying that one of the key healing techniques that I've seen is gratitude. And so I'm going to suggest that we should actually be grateful with what Governor LePage is doing at this point. Because we can have this initial reaction of, oh my God, this is horrible. But he is actually enhancing the conversation. He's catching people's attention. I mean, it was evident with the videos that we have from being up at the State House that people's attention has been caught.
Right.
You know, and I think
Right.
we should be grateful that he gave us this opportunity to bring people out.
That's a good point. I did not think of it that way.
It's
That's
hard
funny.
to remember gratitude at
Right,
times.
right.
My name is Belina Malo Jubera. I am originally from Mexico City. I've been living in the United States for about 12 years. I became an American citizen in 2007 so I could have a right to vote and have my voice heard.
Hi, I'm Brian Leonard, and this is how you can help Occupy Maine. This is how you can get involved. We have an office at 644 Congress Street. Stop in and say hello. Although we are all volunteers working on the show, you can help by donating for our production costs. You can also donate food, clothing, sleeping bags, wintertime materials really, down here at Lincoln Park on Congress Street in Portland. So we'd like you to come down and participate with us. Bring your voice, your ideas, and your spirit. Thank you.
Well, we want to thank folks for watching the show. We hope that you'll tune in the future. Our plans to be on regularly, hopefully once a week for an hour show. We'd like you to tell your friends about the show. If you'd like to be part of the show, we'd be happy to have you. You can contact us through info@occupymaine.com. Isn't that correct, Brian?
That's absolutely correct.
And we'd love to have you in the studio if you'd like to participate in the show. We need lots of help. This is a community effort.